Hey everybody, this is Jonathan Schrantz, and it's a little bit loud here in the Schrantz household. We got the kids kind of running up there having a little bit of fun, but I really wanted to come down here and make this video because I've been wanting to make a video on this really cool weapon that you can play against the French defense for quite some time now, and I think I finally have a really good excuse to make this video because I just beat an international master in 8 moves with this really tricky surprise weapon that you can play against the French defense. So let's just jump right into it. We'll go over the game, and then we can come back and we can kind of look at some of the theory. But it was against the Winawer, so I played knight to c3, and my opponent played bishop to b4. And against the Winawer, you can actually play so many different interesting options as white. One move that is kind of interesting is bishop to d2, and this is the fingerslip variation. And this is not particularly good for whites, but it's really not that bad either. And very often you just get like a complicated tactical game right away, right out of the opening. And there are some interesting traps that the opponent might fall for right away. And also another thing that I really like about it is the lore. This opening actually has a really cool story behind it. Apparently in 1936, Alexander Alekhine was playing a game against Solomon Floor in which Alekhine had this lapsus manus, and he just had this lapse of the hand, and he accidentally played bishop to d2. His intention, apparently, was to play e5, and only after c5 to play bishop to d2. And I don't know if this story is actually true, because also, if you do look in the database, you'll find that several years earlier, Alekhine was actually on the black side of this opening, and somebody played bishop to d2 against him. So it's really not that horrible of a mistake, but it's kind of cool that it sounds like potentially an opening was kind of invented by a finger slip over the board. But okay, here's what happened in the game. My opponent decided to grab on e4. This is obviously the critical move. And instead of taking back right away, which is the move that Alekhine actually preferred in his game, I played the move queen to g4, already asking some very interesting questions of the opponent. So if the opponent is unfamiliar with this, there are a lot of different ways that you can possibly go wrong here. But the two chief moves here, the two most common moves are knight to f6 and queen takes d4. My opponent played queen takes d4, and I think most players here with the white pieces actually just get on with castling. But I had another idea in mind, and the idea was to play knight to f3. And after queen takes d4, this is actually known as the Cunnin double gambit. So I've sacked 2 pawns now, but my hope is that I'm going to be getting at least one back because the queen isn't going to be able to defend both the e pawn and the g pawn forever. And I'm also just hoping to get some sort of initiative out of the opening. I'm going to be able to castle queenside very quickly. My bishop's going to be able to come out very often. I'm going to be having ideas like knight to b5 and just getting some sort of initiative right out of the opening. And my opponent played queen to f6, and I do think that this is actually the best way for black to continue if you do play this variation. But it's not the only choice. A lot of other players are going to try to take this time to throw in an intermezzo, and it's just not very good. So the way that black might decide to try to gain some time against my queen would be with a move like either knight to h6, this is a popular try for black, or even pawn to h5. But either way, if black does counterattack the queen, white's move is identical. So h5, knight h6, if your queen gets attacked, there is just one common idea here for white. You can pause if you want to try to figure this one out. It's not too deep, but the best move for white, and you actually do get an advantage if you find the move, queen takes e6. So before taking the queen back, we want to throw this move in after black recaptures. Now we take back, and we're still down a pawn. But we do have the idea of just simply grabbing this e4 pawn back. We have ideas of taking on e6 and ruining black's structure. And we always have ideas of putting something on b5, usually a knight, sometimes even a bishop. But, you know, one of the knights could start hopping around, and we're going to get castled a little bit quicker than black. Something like this is actually very pleasant for the pawn. We do have some pretty decent compensation here as white. And again, that's the same. If knight h6, it's the same exact thing. Queen takes e6, and you're going to get a very similar position. We're kind of looking at the same sort of squares here with the white pieces. Instead, my opponent played queen to f6, and I do believe that this is the better way to play. Now my knight is hanging. Black has gotten rid of this pin, so I played queen takes e4, sneakily attacking this bishop. So I don't know. Some people might just blunder a bishop here, but okay. My opponent is a strong player, but unfortunately, he did make a rather large mistake. Really, the only move here for Black, before I say what Black actually played, Black really only has one good move, where Black can try to say that he has enough for the pawn. Like, okay, white's still a pawn down, but queen to e7 is Black's really only tried to get any sort of advantage out of this, and is really not much. We can consider all sorts of things here as white. I think a3 and castles have been played. Bishop to b5 might be some computer suggestion for a way to improve as white. But, you know, we're a pawn down, but we at least are getting all of our stuff out quick. And either way Black goes, we're going to be able to try to get some sort of attack out of the opening. My opponent, however, decided to play the move knight to c6, and this does look like the most natural move because the knight comes out, defends the bishop, gets Black a little bit closer to castling on the queen side, but unfortunately this just tactically loses on the spot. So again, if you want to solve this, if you don't see it right away, you can pause your video. But the move I played, the winning move here, is bishop to b5. And after this move, my opponent had to resign. The problem is, I simply now have too many threats. I'm threatening both to take on c6 twice, which would end up winning a rook, and it also removes a defender. So for example, if the opponent does just take on c3, before taking back, which probably is a strong move, I would probably consider taking on c6. And here the idea is that if the pawn takes back, we take with the queen check, and Black is unfortunately going to be losing a lot of material. And there's no time to actually break this pin because something like bishop to d7, which actually might be the best move, but here I can just take on c6. And the big point is, even if Black tries to be tricky, you know, okay, if you take this way, I'm just simply taking this bishop on b4. But if you are trying to be tricky and, okay, I'm going to throw in an intermezzo too, well, I just simply have more intermezzos, and this one comes with check. So a position like this would be totally winning for white. So that's why it was bishop to b5 was the last move of the game. But I do want to kind of come back and run through the opening. My arrows aren't working as well as I'd like them to. I want to come right back and kind of transpose into a little bit more of a theoretical discussion of this opening, because I think it is interesting. And again, it's not great. There are some lines where I think Black can almost force a draw unless, you know, white wants to take a little bit more risks than you usually would. But after queen to g4, another interesting move, in addition to queen takes, which is what we saw in the game, another very important move theoretically is knight to f6. This is possibly even more critical, and at least asks white a lot of tough questions, but a lot of people are going to be unwilling to sack a pawn on g7. But we are being dared, and we ought to, you know, take up the gauntlet. This is kind of a normal enough maneuver in this kind of structure if you've ever played the French defense. There's a lot of lines where we take on g7, attacking the rook, forcing a rook to go to g8, kicking our queen out to the only square, which is h6. And from here, there are a lot of possibilities for Black. And Black is saying, by giving this g-pawn, that it's, you know, white's trying to sack pawns to get the initiative. And Black is saying, well, hey, I'm going to get the open file. I'm going to get my pieces out. My queen is going to eventually be able to come out quickly. I'm going to try to develop, get castled, and I'm just not going to let white get some sort of initiative. And Black here actually has two different, very interesting options. I think there's actually a lot more than two. But the two most popular options that we're going to look at is queen takes d4 and rook to g6. Queen takes d4 is, I believe, the most popular, but not necessarily the best move for Black. And here you can consider a couple different things, but I believe the strongest is castling. This lines the rook up with the queen. That sounds awesome. We're maybe threatening to move this bishop away with some discovered attack on the queen. Feels very good. And it also leaves a little bit of bait. I don't know how many opponents actually would want to take this f-pawn. But this variation does give a lot of insight into the position. It kind of shows how white could get an initiative in this kind of position. So here, white is actually probably winning. It's at least very close. White gets a very strong initiative here after knight to h3. And The problem for black is that after the queen goes somewhere, queen to f5, white now begins with knight to b5. When we can get this kind of move springboard into the position, this will work out very well for us. And black needs to be really careful. There's a lot of mistakes that I think players might make right here on the spot. You have to play a move like knight to a6, which you don't really want to do, because then we are going to be taking right here. Black's going to have to worry that, once you take here, what is going on this square? And this is certainly what we are going to end up doing. And it's still complicated, but it all should favor white. And it's for that reason that I think a lot of players would make the mistake of taking on d2, expecting us to simply take back with the rook. And now knight to a6 here will sufficiently defend the c-pawn. However, we can be really cunning here, and if they do decide to take on d2, we can take with this queen. And all of a sudden, it's black that has this huge dilemma. Either you get checkmated, or you let us take on c7. And so this is just simply a huge problem that black will not be able to survive. And that's just kind of an example. I don't think many people are thinking that greedily in a position like this with black. It feels like white should have something, but I do think it is worth kind of pointing out just how you might get a quick initiative right away. Instead, a more common move is something like rook to g6. There's also interesting ideas from the black point of view of playing other moves like bishop to f8, just kind of saying, I think my bishop is actually a tactical target over here on the b4 square. And in either case, whatever attacks your queen, we are going to need to move away. And it's up to white usually to decide between one of these two squares, either h4 or f4. Typically, h4 is the safer square. If you ever go to f4, black sometimes will be able to remove this bishop. And the bishop very often is a tactical target to a move like knight to b5. But something like this will let black actually kind of escape with the bishop. It's playable. You're going to be moving the queen around. And very often you get into some situation where the queen just keeps getting attacked and you get a lot of lines where there's a lot of repetition. And it's the same if instead we just decide to go to h4. Here's one of the problems for white is that there's so many lines where black can just continue to pester. And something like this is just simply the best, because if we ever do go to h3, for example, now taking on f2 becomes a possibility. Notice how now we've taken away the a3 square for the knight, so something like this becomes a little bit more possible for black. So if you're playing a lower rated player and you do decide to play this variation, sometimes you might have to play something like queen to f4 simply to get your... I forgot to lock the door. Just to get... I got kids walking in. Just to get... the position to keep going. And even if you get hit with this tempo, whatever, you just keep moving on. Maybe you're a little bit worse here with white, but, the game continues. Okay, so that's one problem with the opening is that, and if you do study this with a computer, it's going to find a whole lot of lines where it's just kind of equal. The computer sees draws and it just plays it. From my experience, I've never had anybody actually kind of just force a draw right away with the black pieces, but it is there. It does exist. So again, this isn't like the super duper awesome opening that just wins. Black maybe can force a draw. So if that's okay with you, at least take that into account. Otherwise, you're gonna have to take a little bit of risks to try to get a winning position. Another idea, though, for black, okay, queen takes d4 is, again, I think the most popular move, but rook to g6 is also a very important move to have on alert. But this does give you an extra opportunity. So again, you could go back to h4. This is actually the most played move. And it's very similar now because queen takes d4, we can get castled, and we've kind of seen this. But there is another opportunity for you if the opponent doesn't take on d4 right away. Oh, and we're going to speed this up because the computer's dying. Oh, everything's falling apart over here. Actually, I'm going to plug this in. 1 second. All right. Door's locked. Computer's plugged in. Kids are still running around. Everything's great here. And what were we saying? There is another opportunity here for white. You don't have to go back to h4. You actually can just play something like queen to e3. This is kind of an interesting option that probably does promise white a little bit of an advantage. So this keeps an extra eye on the e4 square. So we're not yet worried about anything like knight to b4 attacking our queen, because this immediately just simply would lose this pawn, and there's no threat yet for this knight. but it also defends this pawn. So perhaps black would be thinking knight to c6. This seems like the next most logical move, developing a piece, attacking the pawn. But here after knight g to e2, just simply defending, we're going to get castled, and eventually we're going to try to untangle the position, and we're just going to try to win this e-pawn back. And we should get some advantage. It doesn't really matter what black decides to do. We're going to castle and then take back on e4. And white's structure is always going to be a little bit better. We're also a little bit faster in development. So something like this should be totally fine for white. But anyways, that just kind of does it. If you're new to this channel, this is kind of what I like to do around here. I like to find interesting, unique openings that are kind of fun and challenging for the opponents, asking lots of questions, sacking lots of pawns, and potentially setting up a lot of different tricks. So if you're into that kind of thing, you could subscribe to the channel. You could help me out by hitting that like button, and I will see you guys for another video.